Hey Ratbags, it's Jade today going over a brand new interview talking about the frequency of updates for Grounded 2 and why they are going to be a bit longer in between these updates for early access, and also talking about what to expect. You've got to remember, a whole bunch of players never actually tried Grounded when it came out, nor in the 2 years it was in early access. They played it when it was a 1.0 game, maybe even on other platforms, and now are still excited about a sequel. But yeah, there's a few things you need to know about development, at least how it went last time and what you can expect this time. So first off, if you've missed it, and it's been said quite a few times now, they literally had to go and make Grounded 2 because of the constraints, technically, of Grounded 1 on older gen consoles like Xbox One and now Switch and PlayStation. They'd always wanted to add things like buggies, the mounts. They tried it in Grounded 1, but it just never really worked because the map was too small. We sadly never got a chance to test that out. It was concept before its full release. Could have maybe found a way to optimize and maybe just about squeeze it in, but they felt that would really be doing a disservice. And that's why we've got Grounded 2 with all new mounts, and there's probably going to be a big focus on these in the future. But why early access again? Grounded originally was made by about 13 people in the early days, conceptual team working on their own project away from some of the other bigger teams on games like Avowed and The Outer Worlds. They had the idea before Xbox bought them, and then Microsoft said, you know what, this is a good idea, keep going with it. They added a few more team members over the years to a core of about 25, and they did use outside studios like Black Shamrock to help flesh out some areas as well as make some assets and art. Particularly the Pond update and quite a few weapons and gear were also done by places or studios like these. So the core team growing to 25, they obviously still had support from Microsoft though, and they used these outside studios to help them with certain things, as well as get extra support with accessibility, playtesting and bug testing Q&A from Microsoft or some bigger parts of Obsidian. But relatively, the team were kind of left to implement their own ideas without too much interference. But yeah, it was a game preview program. During early access, the first few months at least, they were trying to do monthly updates. And they needed to get content out. Grounded was a shell of what you see as today. It really didn't have a lot of content. Even the art director Kaz said to me in a dev interview, it definitely felt more like a tech demo at times. That basically the game just had not a lot in it really. But they were working diligently and hard on actually adding stuff quickly. So within them first few months, we got things like having new character perks, the crow being added to the backyard, a whole ton of new buildables. But it turns out rushing to get this content often made maybe some mistakes, and sometimes it would be a little bit buggy. The team were absolutely maybe overworking themselves to get this content on a monthly basis, and it maybe wasn't actually giving players something to really look forward to. Having this new content arrive so quickly, believe it or not, meant that they weren't really taking on board some of the features and possibly giving the feedback that the Grounded devs needed. That's such a crucial thing from early access, to get feedback from the community, and Grounded have done that really well over the years. So after about 3-4 months, I do believe they decided to go ahead and say we're going to be doing updates every 2 to 3 months, bar maybe some hotfixes. So you might expect the same with Grounded 2 in early access, but it does look like it's going to be even longer. Excerpts from an interview with Games Radar that obviously they've been teasing out each day. They said they're going to need more time since the world is 3 times bigger. They've got new big mechanics like the mounts to add. And they also want to make sure that the narrative is a really core experience of Grounded 2. So it's going to be 4 to 5 months every update, but the updates will be chunkier. Now this was alluded to in another previous interview, but I don't believe they actually gave a full time span. They simply just said updates would be a little bit slower. So we may only get maybe 3 major updates a year in the first year of Grounded, but they should contain a lot of content. And I can already hear some haters out there, how are they doing this? Microsoft have billions, Obsidian have made lots of money. They've got a whole nother studio in Eidos Montreal helping them. Well, they still probably haven't got anything close to like 500 developers still working on Grounded 2. A team of maybe probably 20 to 30 on the Obsidian side, and maybe another 40 or 50 on the actual Eidos Montreal. Eidos Montreal are a support studio in a lot of ways now. They haven't released a mainline game for a good few years. So, even though yes, you can disagree and absolutely have the opinion that maybe Grounded should have been just a full game, that would have meant we'd have to wait longer, obviously. And since early access was so successful in adding community actual things that people wanted, why would you not want to use that again? I've covered this topic in the past. It was alluded to by the original Grounded team that actually they would more than likely try and use early access again. So I think it's a great thing. Some game companies for sure use early access as a shield to mask the fact they've got literally no content and no content incoming for a good long time, or the game is really in just a rough state. Grounded wasn't like that. It didn't have content when it first launched in early access for sure, but it ran pretty well, it looked pretty great, and over the actual years, bar a few tiny incidents with maybe water running out, there was never really any big huge issues that you might have seen in other early access games. They had PTBs, which were testing branch of the game, that even on Xbox you could test and give feedback before everyone got the update. So I'm hoping they're going to do that again with Grounded 2. I'll be very surprised if they don't have public test branch servers for players to give feedback about upcoming updates. During Grounded's lifetime, of course, they added a ton of stuff. So many big updates. They were named the Hot and Hazy, the Bug Strike Back, Into the Wood, and a lot more. And these always built up huge amount of hype. There were a few periods where some of these updates did end up taking a bit longer, especially towards the end of early access. But I really appreciate that they're up front right now and saying it will be 4 to 5 months in between updates. There is going to be a roadmap on day 1 of Grounded 2's release, give us an idea of what they're working on. And that's a good thing for sure, although we've got to be wary. They did have a roadmap for Grounded 1 also. It was listing a bunch of stuff that would come to Grounded, but there was stuff that never did. And that ended up pissing off quite a few people in the community. Even though that's really the big point of early access, things can change. Nothing is really guaranteed. The devs may decide to walk back an idea if they feel it's not beneficial. So things like zip lines, the koi pond environment getting a re-up. In fact, it was changed 2 or 3 times in the end. Equipped items not using backpack space, the hedge environment, password protected games, friend invites, mosquitoes. Basically all the stuff that you've seen in Grounded. Some things that never really maybe they achieved. Weather, towards the end of Grounded they did clarify that it would just be too taxing to try and add wet looks to everything, but might be something they would love to add in the future. So of course naturally that's something I'm sure a lot of players would like to see some kind of version of in Grounded 2. Powered buildings, and yeah, my assumption was that that was always going to be electricity, but maybe it would have been bug powered buildings and stuff. And dedicated servers is probably the one that a lot of people were unhappy with for a while, as well as mod support, even though Grounded is overwhelmingly played by a huge majority on Xbox, which has no access to these types of mods. Not yet at least anyway. In the end, they did obviously add more backyard environments, got tons more biomes added, lots new creatures, backyard changing events when you think about the shovel, as well as the factional reactivity and the mixer. They're all classed as changing events, even the haze and stuff like that. I'm hoping that returns to Grounded 2. And while I did add things like defences, it ended up being really no. There was a big shout out for people to give ideas about what new defences they could add after the Grounded 1.0. And then they simply went and added literally nothing. It was pretty much, I'm pretty sure it was like the ash spiky walls and that was it. A lot of stuff I'd leaked and showed like honey floors or ice floors or catapults never made it into the game. And of course, framework for player generated gameplay ended up becoming playgrounds. This was something I was really keen on back then, feeling like it would be so cool if you could make creations and share them with players. I never imagined it to be the actual playground that we got. And although Playground was maybe a bit underutilized by the community, it's still a great idea and I hope it does come back for Grounded 2. What they've got to do is make sure it arrives with 1.0. That was the big problem with Playgrounds. By the time it got released, a whole bunch of players had pretty much completed Grounded and gone. There was also a bunch of issues with some of the items that you could use, really just not getting enough quality of life stuff with them, which led to a lot of frustration with people trying to make maps, and of course bugs and issues as well that still slip through the net. And worst of all, it took them quite a bit of time to go ahead and add an ability to search through maps instead of having to just rely on codes being posted in Discord or on YouTube videos. But I do believe if Grounded 2 came out, and if they wanted to, they could really work on this stuff. It all just depends on how much data they've got, how many maps were made with Grounded 1, and and whether or not they can make more of a success with it this time, especially if they will also hopefully be launching on other platforms like PlayStation and Switch at the same time as the Grounded 1.0. And dedicated servers, well, that got solved, of course, by the ability to share your world. Not ideal, but actually still pretty decent, especially for console players that can't or don't normally host their own servers. They go and use a server rental site. Sharing your world was pretty game changing. Only Fallout 76 with its premium subscription allowed you to do something similar. The fact these guys were putting it in for free was big in the game. Since then, we know that it's going to be used by State of Decay 3 developers, having worked with Grounded as well. So yeah, there's lots of things good about what they did do. But ultimately, I recognise that some players still would just like a more traditional way, especially on PC, of hosting your own server. And modding support, of course, could be better than Playgrounds. So, a lot of talk about Grounded 1 there, but that's just to give you a real idea of what to expect. They updated this a few times, they added a lot more. I'm sure that's what we're going to see with the Grounded 2 roadmap. The rest of this article does talk about their focus on story, basically saying that they knew the Grounded team really wanted to make sure the story was good and right. They did feel like they did want to improve it, that they could have gone deeper with narrative and developed it more. It's a bit of a sad one. It does really feel like the whole Grounded 1 team are not working on Grounded, instead working on something else completely. I've been speculating that their director, Adam Brennicky, the guy that helped create Grounded, has moved on for sure, given we've got a brand new director working on this. But I just assumed a lot of the old team would still be working alongside. It does look like it really is a case of the Grounded original team working on some top secret new project. Anyway, Chris Barker, the new director, says that was something we wanted to establish right from the beginning. That way we were able to develop Grounded 2 because we have the foundational base we built with Grounded. It means they were able to take on these sorts of challenges earlier. Whereas with the first game, the team's really figuring out how to make survival mechanics feel really awesome. We know this whole story's not going to be there from day one. A lot of that's going to come together with 1.0. But it does look like they've definitely got more of an idea about really structuring the story and not making any changes like we saw with Grounded 1, where they did cancel things like the Watcher. Grounded 2 is a great opportunity to hit the narrative right out of the gate. We'll have Act 1 ready for the early access launch, which will be in itself a self-contained chapter. That can help us inform how we handle larger updates down the line and how we get from point A and point B. That's really it. Grounded 2 is gonna need lots and lots of time to get some of these updates maybe implemented. It should be worth it with the kind of content we saw in Grounded 1 eventually. Taking on board feedback, meaning there's more time to also go over ideas from the community. Not doing this simply because they're just being lazy, but really trying to engage with people about what they want to see added to Grounded. Of course, we'll get definitive news about what the future looks like for Grounded 2 closer to release. And as soon as we get that roadmap, I'll deliver you guys everything you need to know. So until next time, I'll catch you ratbags later.